I'm Ruth Hughes.
Hi.
Thank you to those of you who are staying for the final panel. Sorry we haven't opened the bar, but we appreciate having this conversation. We know the Texas manufacturing sector is growing. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. We've heard a lot about it today, and so I'm excited to go over this topic. By way of introduction, I'm Ruth Hughes. I am a partner at Kelly Hart & Hallman, where I practice government relations. Prior to that, I served as Texas Secretary of State during the pandemic and got to have a very front row view of supply chain issues that came up. So I'm very excited to be here and get to have this conversation about onshoring and nearshoring. Joining me today, of course, is Rogelio De Los. If you'll raise your hands, the audience knows he's the co-founder and managing director of Dulles Capital in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, and he flew in today to join us. Thank you for being here. And Thomas Michael Hogg here to my left, managing director of TMH. He's in the investment consulting group. He also is the author of Profitable Growth Strategy and a columnist in El Financiero, very good Spanish skills, and lives in Houston, Texas. Ed Trevis, who is the president and CEO of Corvalent Corporation, hailing from Cedar Park near Austin, Texas, by way of Brazil, many decades ago, but still. And of course, Helen Ramirez, the city manager of Brownsville. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And please share more about your background as I direct different questions to you. We'll just have a little conversation here for half an hour before we all hit the road. So Rogelio, I'll start with you. There's been a lot said about nearshoring and this phenomenon, and is it really, particularly after the pandemic, and is that really more of a reshoring and getting out of China? What is your view on the geostrategic sort of view of opportunities between Texas and Mexico?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. So let me give you some context. I come from an entrepreneurial background. I started 7 companies, sold 3 of them. Last one was in 2007, and after that, I got invited to basically explore the idea of launching the venture capital industry in Mexico and in Latin America. And I have since then been actively investing in companies in this side of the world, in the US, but all throughout Latin America, from Mexico to Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. So let's get the stage set. I think that definitely things are changing, and the dynamics of the current geopolitics around the world are setting a stage where closeness, trust, and competitiveness are driving decision making. And sometimes these adjustments are having an impact on how we are structured, how we're operating. And definitely, sometimes these relocations are happening fast, some others not that fast, because there's a cost involved and investment involved around it. So just 2 or 3 data points. China used to export to the US around 21% of what the US was buying. Today it's at 13%. Mexico has captured 3% of that difference. I think it has been a little bit diversified how the U.S. is now buying or acquiring products and services from throughout the world. Now, having said that, Monterrey, from where we are, has been capturing an amount of incredible amount of investment, around 68% of the foreign direct investment of this nearshoring movement. Of new investments are coming to just the city of Monterrey. But some of them are coming from China. They're finding a pathway out of these geopolitical dynamics, that they are buying properties or renting properties even without seeing them. Today, the occupation of industrial properties, the data point that was released yesterday, is at 0.8%. So there's a saturation already of these relocation efforts, and we think that this is just the beginning. There are some positive things and also some challenging things. I can give more context around it, but I would like the other panelists to jump on this.
I'm going to add a little bit to what was said. So the city of Brownsville is the largest city in the Rio Grande Valley. We're about a population close to about almost 200,000. SpaceX launches out of there. Hopefully they'll be launching by the end of this year. Also, just but what I've noticed is we have a great relationship with Matamoros, Mexico. It's our sister city to the south. We capture about 1.2 million people in our growth capture area. And what we find is that they have a strong maquiladora industry there. And what we're finding is that during COVID and after COVID, some of those industries moved to Brownsville. So, or also reinvested in Brownsville, especially in technology. So that's been a very interesting dynamic. We're a city where we're not a harsh border, or a large border, like you see in Juarez, El Paso, or Tijuana, San Diego. We have a seamless, I would say, relationship along the Rio Grande River, where it's like also a pedestrian bridge that unites our two cities as one, right, through commerce. And despite the whole migrant influx that we're living, we do it in a very humanitarian way because we have a great relationship. So the relationships are very strong. We've also noticed that Chinese investors have purchased more land in Matamoros. And so we're just seeing that dynamic that you've referred to, but in real life in our city. And it's actually been very prosperous for us as an economic driver.
And Thomas, what can you tell us about ally shoring, and what is that, in the context of what we're discussing here today on manufacturing and even the Chinese influence? What is ally shoring in this context?
Yeah, I don't like the word nearshoring as much. So ally shoring refers to make business with an ally, with a friend. And what we know is that in Texas especially, I guess every family has a connection to Mexico. So the families have been connected for years, and what we have to do right now is to connect business and to connect the economy. Recently, we invited a really important investor to Monterrey, and it was his first time being in Mexico and Monterrey, and we asked him, hey, is it your first time in Mexico and Monterrey? And he said yes. And we asked him, why don't you come, or why haven't you been to Mexico before? And his answer was, why should I come to Monterrey when I'm in Texas? And we want to invite you to a little change that mindset and get to know a little bit more about Mexico, about Monterrey. Monterrey, for example, it's a city with 5 million people. In 10 years, it will go up to 10 million people. A population will grow. And I'm coming from Germany, having spent 17 years in Mexico, now being for more than 2 years in Houston. I know the Mexicans and the Mexican culture, married to a beautiful Mexican wife. And the thing here is Mexico has a really qualified workforce. They're graduating each year more engineers in Mexico than in Germany or in France, for example. And also it's a really young workforce. So in average, when we talk about demographics, Mexico is an average 29 years old, comparing to Germany, 48 years old, comparing to China and the US, around 42 years old. So it's a really young, developed workforce. And what we want to do, obviously, we want to work with you on manufacturing, but we don't want to be the typical maquiladora. We want to build with Texas the future verticals, the future industries. When we talk about health tech, when we talk about manufacturing tech, when we talk about fintech, there's so much potential to linking ideas, innovation, and talent. And we should combine this and match this, and then really we can talk about an ally partnership.
Sure. And I can tell you from Austin's perspective in particular, we certainly see Monterrey, Mexico on the business side of things as sort of part of that Texas triangle in many ways, and a city that I think we're all looking for more opportunities to work with. So Ed, I know that you recently went with a group of CEOs to DC to talk about the industry, and can you share what you learned or what you shared with them in this context?
Yeah, we don't have 3 hours here, but if we did, I will probably tell you so much I learned with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I was there, part of a Vistage International, the largest CEO organization in the world. I was very honored to get an award, and they actually took us to D.C. to talk to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I have to say, I kind of try to represent the mostly small to medium-sized businesses. And one of the things that I learned there, and I will take you a little bit more on a global perspective, because, we're talking about Mexico here, one of the greatest partners in the United States, the second biggest customer of the United States. But why we're doing our political bickering in Washington, are we not taking this trade all the way down to South America? And I'm not saying this because I'm from Brazil. Being here for 40 years, I'm more American than Brazilian. But I can tell you, if we open all doors of trade between now and Argentina, you probably never heard about China again. China what? Because I'll tell you, that's the biggest market right in our backyard. And I question, why is China buying a bunch of land in Mexico? It's not to expand manufacturing, folks. They have enough there. It's a national security issue. And I'm not trying to be politics, it's just obvious. Something that makes sense. And the feds are not worried about this stuff. As a matter of fact, what I learned in D.C., it's that they sent 6 congressmen down to Latin America and South America to find out if China was taking over those countries, in a way. Oh my God, did we just figure that one out? So we're not worried about this stuff, and I like Texas to be the lead of this new frontier. Because if they're not doing that in Washington, we can do in Texas today. The size of the economy that we have today, we should be able to, we have enough power to actually do so. So that's what my point is in terms of, nearshoring. It's not just near Mexico, Canada. It's all the way down south. It's a market issue, not just manufacturing capabilities. We need to bring manufacturing back to the Occident, right? To the Western world. But we're gonna do this in a much more strategic way.
And Ed, tell us about Corvalent and how you were impacted during the pandemic and since then, what you're seeing.
Obviously, the supply and demand issue was a huge problem with us. But I think that, again, a national security issue is that if China invades Taiwan and we have a lockdown situation, the world would stop. Just how serious this is. So you would think that not only cities, but states, but the federal have to be worried about this stuff right now. And we're not addressing this as focused as we should do. Corvalent, we deal with industrial customers. Basically, people that are making machinery, industrial processes and stuff. We're a single source to over 400 customers today. And these are serious organizations like Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. We deal with a lot of medical companies that are making MRIs and all kinds of different products. If we don't ship, the world stops because we're a sole source to this company. So I had to have product, major inventory investment I had to do in order to comply with our customers. We're a 30-year-old company, Cadillac in the industry. We had to support these customers. I had no choice. It's not a matter of finances, it's a matter of national security in many, many ways on the national economy, right?
Thank you. And Helen, I know you started to talk a little bit about the manufacturing opportunities in Brownsville. Can you expand on that and share with us a little bit more about your workforce and your educational focus to make sure that we have those skills that we need for Texas to continue to be successful?
Sure. I think we were fortunate because we have the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley. It's about 32,000 students. We also have Texas Southmost College, which is a 95-year-old community college. When SpaceX needed orbital welding, they created it. Or better safety standards, they were there to assist. What's unique is that we're that microcosm of Mexico, right? Where our average age is 29 years old. I talk a lot about us being an intergenerational workforce. What does that mean? And that brings a lot of reliability and it takes risk away from many companies, is that the father may work there, but also the cousin, the son, because there's a path towards, whether it's advanced manufacturing, they open up a new line. I'll give you an example. Rich Products, which is CPAC, does food, frozen food products, sells at Walmart, for example. They had to pivot during COVID, like many manufacturing companies. They didn't shut down. Here we are, the world wasn't going to restaurants anymore, or even, much of our country was not. And so many people went to buy frozen food or seafood and those things. They actually did a partnership with Budweiser, and they changed their batter. Do you know that the highest revenue of that company was during COVID? because they pivoted and they were agile. Rich Products in Brownsville, they call it the lighthouse of the nation for that company, has other 50 locations because there's a path to leadership. There's a path to, if you stay with us, we will pay you a good wage. So it's those, and they're now doing $120 million expansion in one of our poorest districts in our city. So for me as a city manager, what I strive for, we're divided into 4 districts, that all 4 districts have jobs, education, homes, and a place to live and work and just congregate and just go to a park and trail. That's what I think many cities lack. We always put resources on the same boulevard or same downtown, but aren't we better? Won't we be better if all parts of our cities are really looked at equally? So we hosted a Careers in Coffee event last week. We founded it in 2021, right after COVID, and the doors started opening, and they're like, well, how did you know to do it then? I'm like, well, what we heard from companies is that I can't hire workforce. I don't know where to find them. People are still at home or virtual, but I want to meet them. And so what we did, free, some of these job fairs, they're at hotels and you have to charge to get there. This is a free sponsored event by the City of Brownsville and the Greater Brownsville Economic Development Council. We gave free coffee, free headshots, resume building, confidence building, and 50 companies. It's grown from 40 to 50 companies. Companies even including SpaceX, or last week, Next Decade, we offered 3,000 jobs. I don't know where in the world you can actually have a face-to-face interview with some of these large companies such as Next Decade, Bechtel, or SpaceX in Brownsville. And that's happening in the here and now. So we're very excited, and I always invite everybody to really see what's going on because it's a wonderful movement for our South Texas family. Thank you.
That's great, and I think our border communities, more than many of our other cities in Texas, really appreciate that relationship. I mean, Mexico is our largest trade partner at $230 billion a year, and Brownsville is certainly a big pathway towards that. Rogelio, in Monterey, how do you see the workforce and the educational development and how that ties into the workforce and investments there?
Well, on my entrepreneurial years, I had 2 companies around education. One was building training centers to basically certify people's skills and competencies on international standards, like welders, operators of plastics machines and things like that. And then I partnered with ACT to create an employability system called Workies. And I have seen since then that the industry is really well connected to the educational system. Today, integrating and the challenge or the opportunity that I see is that, and I agree with your point of view that being on the same time zone, having similar cultures, kind of being well connected, there's a huge opportunity of instead of following the horizontal development that the world has been very focused at and more in the north. Now we have to go to the vertical development, and that's the name of the game, and that's what's going to make America much more competitive and inclusive. Now, going back, I serve on the board of Tec de Monterrey, and it's a private nonprofit university with 60 campuses with 2 brands. They have like the Tec de Monterrey university system, and they only have 2% of the higher education, but they cover like 70% of the high-income higher education segment. And then they have Tech Milenio, that is kind of the community college system of the U.S. And they're very well connected and helping people get degrees, associate degrees or degrees and master's degrees of people that are already working. The opportunity that I see is that we need to convert that Texas triangle into a flag, and I call it the green flag. We have to just create the pole through the Highway 35 and connect all of that region through the Laredos, Monterey, and Saltillo, and obviously the Valley, and work together as a region and basically position ourselves as the future of the green economy. Because I know that we have many ingredients already. We just need to package and position it ready. Now, I'm just joining the board, as I was telling you, of UT Austin. And my bet here is that we need to create those relationships with our university systems. We have, out of the top 25 entrepreneurial universities in the world, 6 of them are in this region. So we have to leverage the capabilities that we already have and the core competencies that we have as an economic region, and come together. And as Thomas was saying, I have 1,500 relatives on this side of the border. I did a 23andMe, and they're there, maybe at 1%, 0.5%, but I'm connected to them.
Los primos.
Somos primos, exactamente. So we can build on that, and I think that we are seeing that Tesla, as they're planning on working the build out of the Gigafactory in Monterrey, they're connecting Tech Milenio and other universities with the Community College of Austin to see what they have already built for them, and start building on that so that we serve better the needs of industry. So this is happening, but we need to accelerate it. Education is not only the future in the youth, but also access to opportunities.
That's great, thank you. And that collaboration with our universities on both sides of the border is really critical to making sure that our employers have the skilled workforce that they need. So we're looking for more opportunities now as we come out of the pandemic to try to get higher education institutions working together globally. So I think that's going to be very important. I agree. And Thomas, we talked about green and going south. I know Rogelio was coming back from Africa when I last saw him, so we've expanded the world, although we all agree with Ed that we could go south and just hit the Americas. But let's talk a little bit about USMCA, because it does create such an opportunity, and it really, I don't want to say forces, but let's say highly encourages, right? Creates opportunities for this triangle of Canada, Mexico, and the United States to really be a powerhouse in the world. And it got implemented, of course, during the pandemic, and I'm wondering how you've seen that create opportunities for employers.
When we talk about the size of the opportunity, when we talk about the size of the economy, and when we talk about the size of the commerce, which is done in the USMCA zone, it's around 16% of the global GDP and 16% of the global commerce are done in these 3 countries. So we have a lot of delegations coming in from all over the world to Texas, to Houston, to Monterrey. And I mean, they want to be neighbors from the States, and they want to be in this trade zone. It's a huge opportunity already when we talk about business, economy, and commerce. But what I learned now from Texas, and I really admire Texas, is small government approach and pro-business. So at the end of the day, on a federal level, I guess they understood it from a strategic point of view. But now when we have to operate it on a business level, we have to be a small government and pro-business. And now what Rogelio is telling, not only pro-business, also pro-education. So when we mix small government, pro-education, and pro-business, this will be, for me, I guess, the most competitive region in the world for the next 20 to 30 years.
And Ed, from a business perspective, from your business, how are you finding hiring and retaining? How are you impacted by our educational efforts, and how do you see them going forward?
In the last, specifically in the last 3 years, we have had major issues in hiring people, and just mainly because the market was pretty tight in Texas. I think Texas, I wish the federal government learned a lot from Texas, right? You would think so, right? So let's see what they're doing there. It must be working. Let me see what it is. So we have this major demographic explosion in Texas, and that created a really big challenge for us. And what's happening today, you're starting to see a lot of companies doing layoffs and stuff like that all over the United States. And all it's based on trying to bring inflation down, high interest rates, which doesn't help anybody. I think from a national security interest, it's very, very important that they look at it, that we're living a different economy. This is not your typical standard thing that I raise interest rate, I lower inflation, and everybody's doing good. There's a national security issue that we have to take care of it and just build more manufacturing. We need to build more businesses here. We need to keep the economy stable, and that's not by raising interest rates and really depleting a situation that's causing majority of the employment issues as well. You know, so this is creating inflation in many ways, and they're trying to lower that, and lowering that by doing with interest rates is not going to lower inflation and unemployment. It's just not going to happen. We need more people here. And that's a thing that I talked over there too, about the pillars that I believe that this country needs to do in order to fix that problem. We're in a different world right now in terms of the economy, right? We're in a different global situation, right?
Can I add to that? In the last decade, from 2010 to 2020, the top public companies of Latin America as a region lost $500 billion of value. In that same time period, new companies that were funded with capital, new startups and scale-ups, created around $213, $215 billion of value. And the type of jobs that they created are much more higher paid. If we talk about the future of our continent, we have to bet on the use and adoption of creation, use, or adoption of technology. We have close to 6,500 people in our companies. We keep growing every year, and the thing that grows the most is women employed in our companies, and the leadership roles that they take in decision-making positions. And today, what we see is that the growth of our economies cannot be dependent only on the demographic growth. It has to be on productivity, and that is where technology has a huge impact. You'll be amazed to see how your lives personally, as it has been impacted in the last 20 years with internet, how AI or generative AI will start to be embedded in many of the things that you use, and you will become a superwoman or a superman, really. And this is going to create many opportunities for the people that are much more productive. What's happening today is that people don't want to go to work anymore. They don't want to go to the office. Not even the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at office meetings. Keeping Monday and Friday flexible. And the companies are being forced to say, okay, bottom performers are being displaced. The top performers are becoming super top performers because they're using these technologies and these innovations. So we need to work, going back to education, and we need to prepare our young workforce to enter this type of environment and adapt how our companies are structured and how they are operating to compete and adapt into this marketplace. So it's a challenge, but we're in this process of reinventing ourselves. It's Schumpeter again, creative destruction.
And Helen, how do you see that training in the manufacturing industry and the education industry in general in Brownsville? The other question, I'll leave it for everyone who wants to jump in after we talk about that, is whether the federal governments get it. We talked a little bit about the U.S. government, but maybe Thomas and Rogelio, we should talk a little bit about the government in Mexico and how they're impacting some of these opportunities that we may or may not be able to take advantage of. But let's start with the Brownsville educational workforce and that relationship and the border.
Yeah, I'll give you an example with Rich Products when it announced it's a $120 million expansion. Of course, employees were kind of concerned, what does that mean for my job? You're going to build the second or third advanced manufacturing arm in that company in the expansion. But really, they upskilled much of their labor. They upskilled, they redirected, they looked at efficiencies, KPI, and so they were able to conserve many of those jobs. Even as a city, I have over 1,100 employees, right? And we span very different. We run a landfill. It's a $14 million revenue generator. I mean, we have all different types. I call it like 22 business units within the city. And so in another panel I was on, we talked about culture and organizational behavior and treating people right. The command and control type of workplace is gone, guys. It's gone. And so we were just given an award in New York. We're not called HR, we're organizational development and human resources, because I always talk about people, projects, and purpose. purpose to work in government, you got to have the purpose, right? It is, especially if you work in a border economy, you know, you're always dealing with many. You have to be bilingual. You have migrants. We're just a binational economy. So it's purpose, people, because you're not a number. You have a family. We care about you, and really want what's best for you, and you're important to us. And projects, because we all got to get stuff done, guys. We got to run a city. We got to operate it. We got to be efficient with the budget that we have, right? So those are the things that we also need to be talking about. It's not only the telework or I'm going to a every other Friday off kind of program, but also is, you know, how are, you know, mental health, how are we connecting with our employees? Are we? And do we care about them? So I created a leadership program. My front line, my maintenance guys, my bus drivers, 650 of my employees went through a leadership conference. It didn't matter where you were on the line. You know, historically, it's always been retreats. Leadership has been at the top. I'm going to hold a 2-day employment leadership conference. The whole committee is just employees. They're making up. Then they give me the agenda of like, this is what we're going to be doing. All the panelists are employees. And that's from my bus drivers that talk about conflict management to my landscaper to my engineer. One city, and it's a 2-day conference. I'm so excited, and we already have more than 600 employees signed up, and it's not mandatory.
That's great. You want to jump in on the federal government?
Yeah, I want to be polite, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'm as a business consultant, I'm asking myself, okay, what should be the main objective or the key performance indicator for the Mexican president or at federal level? So Mexico right now, they will grow this year 3%, and that's kind of good. But an economy with this opportunity and being the neighbor of the United States should grow double digit, or at least 5 to 6% or 7%. But the most important thing here, or the most important indicator here, is GDP per capita. So Mexico hasn't grown its GDP per capita for the last, I guess, 20, 30 years. And that's the main issue. And that's, for me, would be the most important KPI nowadays on a federal level, is to really raise the GDP per capita, and that, I mean, the country is getting poorer. And that they can build up a middle class, as we have the middle classes in some of the Western European countries. So this would be the two most important KPIs: building up a middle class with higher GDP per capita.
Rogelio?
I might not be as polite as like a German
Okay.
here, but
You're my type.
they have to take the foot out of the pedal, the braking pedal. They just don't interfere. They should be just kind of, if they really could add value to us, is just set up a direction. And that direction should be, let's get into the digital or knowledge economy. That should be the way to move forward. And going on the GDP per capita, Monterrey has been it's at 17,000. That's a good GDP per capita for advanced manufacturing economies. We don't want to be there. We want to go to 30,000. And why not maybe get closer to what Texas has? And that wage difference, it's a challenge, but also creates opportunities. I can share quickly a story. 3 weeks before we went into isolation in February of 2020, I was in Austin with 10 business people from Monterrey. We met with 13 CEOs of tech companies. And it was incredible that half of them didn't know where Monterrey was. Only 2 of them had relationships with, one with Mexico and one with a Caribbean island. But 80% of them were working with tech-based employees out of India. India, a 16-hour flight, 13-hour time difference, other culture, other language. Why don't you just open your eyes and explore what you can do vertically and get on a flight, and in 45 minutes, and they go there once a year. Here you can go every week if you want, and you will connect with what we said: family, time zone, culture, values, and language. And at the end, it's something that makes everyone more productive. And things happen at the local level. Federal level, they just distract us. That's a reality.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Helen.
I'll just say, just being from a local government, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Even in the space economy, we gave incentives to SpaceX from a local. We have, a quarter cents of our sales tax go to economic development corporations. We have 2. And a lot of the incentives are homegrown ours. Finally, the state of Texas authorized the Space Commission and put $350 million in there. But I always say Space Coast Florida is light years ahead of us, right? We're already behind, kind of get out of the way and let us innovate. The FAA and its rules, how long, and I'm a government, and I'm all the antithesis of government, even though I'm a city manager. I believe, and I worked 10 years in private firm. Actually, international business development was part of it. I was the one working in India or South Africa, in Mozambique, for an engineering European company. So my perspective is different. I think we need to get out of the way, regulate less, but be safe. But really, that's our role. And that's what our role should be. There's a lot on the backs of local government. And there always will be, right? Because we're the ones who create that quality of life that even want you to bring your company here. We're the ones that we should be grooming you. But I'm kind of disappointed that the tech companies, but I'm not surprised, don't know Mexico. I know when I was in Madrid, a lot of the Spanish companies, when we had a really bad downturn in 2012, 2013, 25% unemployment rate, and all of our labor pool left Spain. At one point, 90% of our contracts were national, but in a few years, 60% of our contracts were international because there was no work at home. So everybody kind of left in other parts of Europe. But what I'm saying is that we were bought out by Indra Systems, an IT company, and I asked, well, why don't you do business development in the United States? I was I was moved from one department to the next. I was the only American in a company of 400 people. And they said, well, we can't compete with them. They're already so far ahead. But I'm just like saying, well, it's not about competing, it's about supporting. And if you don't try to go in, you will never make it. They will always be ahead of you. So I really challenged, my company, the company I work for, to invest. They never did. I finally moved here and, I did part-time business development, and you don't want to be working that time zones because you never sleep, right? It just didn't make sense to me. Mexico and all these European, even Spain, they have to be confident and put in the resources to get into that marketplace, even if you lose money, because in the end, everything's gonna pass you by, you'll never be able to catch up. So I challenge Mexico and Spanish-speaking companies or European companies and South American companies to come invest and take that time.
Thank you. I'm going to let Thomas have the last word because we're over time and really appreciate everyone joining us today. I know we're going to hit the road.
Just closing, Ruth, Helen and Ed are already invited, but next month in November, from the 13th of 16th month, we have our big innovation festival, innovation entrepreneurship and investment festival in Monterey. It's called Inc. Monterey, and all of you are invited to join us next month in Monterey.
Thank you, and thank you all for staying till the end. We appreciate it. Thank you all our panelists, and look forward to continuing the conversation in other venues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.